Hello Backyard Vegetable Gardeners, welcome to the Backyard Vegetable Gardening Channel. Today's Friday, January the 10th, 2025, and I sure hope you're having a great day. Today's video we're going to be talking about growing onions, and I'll walk you through how I start mine indoors for transplanting outside. Whether you enjoy them sliced to put on your sandwiches, or you like them chopped to put in your soups and your casseroles, or even dried to make seasoning, onions are just great things to be having growing in your garden. We even use white onions and yellow onions to make a certain home remedy for coughs and colds. So if that sounds like something that interests you, stick around and we'll show you how. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Sure hope you're having a great day. Where I'm at, it's snowing again, so it's a great day to make a video. Don't know what the weather's like where you're at, but I sure hope you're staying warm and cozy inside. And I hope you're ready to get your onions started. At least if you're in my neck of the woods, this is the most opportune time to be getting those seeds started. We like to do it somewhere about the middle of January, and it just worked out perfect. We've been hoping to do it this week or next week, so we got a snow day. Figured we'd take you along for the ride. Now there's two things we got to talk about before we get too invested in this onion growing business. Number one, they're biennials. That means they have a 2-year life cycle. And that first year, that's where we're going to try to grow our bulbs. If you're trying to save seed, you want to let them go to the second year. Well, the reason it's so important to know that they're biennials and that they go to seed in their second year is that onion plants can be triggered to think that they're in their second year of growing just by a short period of cold. And when they start growing back again, they're going to think they're in that second year of growth. They're not going to produce as big of bulbs as they would have if they didn't go through that. The main thing is to know that we're trying to start them now so we can get them out there a few weeks before that last expected frost date so they can grow good. Now, typically when you're starting from seeds, that's not a big idea or a big deal, or when you're buying seed starts from the store. Most of the time, your problem's going to come if you've bought those little onion sets. They look like little bitty onion bulbs. Those things are probably, you're going to get them and they're probably going to be dormant or at least semi-dormant. And when you put them in the ground, they're a good chance they're probably going to think they're in the second year growing, and they're not going to get as big as they could have. That don't mean you're not going to get onions. It just means they're not going to be as big as you could. Say if you could grow a 3 or 4 inch onion, it might be a 2 or a 3 inch onion, just somewhere along that. And the second thing you need to know is about day length. When you're talking about onions, there's 3 types of onions. You've got long day onions, which are grown up north of me. You've got intermediate day onions, which is about the middle of the country roughly. Then you got short day onions, which is in the south of the country. It all has to do with your latitude. Not going to get into all that, but where I live, we can grow either intermediate day onions or we can grow short day onions. Both do equally well. Long day onions, they need 14 or more hours of daylight before that bulbing process is triggered. For intermediate day onions, it's about 12 or 14 hours. And for the short day, it's about 11 or so hours, 11 to 12 hours. But all you need to know is if you live up north, you need to plant long day onions. If you live about in the middle where I live, according to longitude, you can get by with either intermediate or short day. But if you live south of me, you're going to want to do them short day onions. And if you can keep that in mind when you're selecting your variety of onion, you'll do pretty good. You have a good chance of growing a good size onion. This year, like most years, we're going to grow 3 different style of onions. We're going to grow red onions, we're going to grow white onions, and we're going to grow yellow onions. Now, this year, I'm not going to try to grow as many as I tried last year. I just run into problems too many times because we haven't been doing this very long as far as trying to grow, to raise all these onions. And what happened to me last year was they didn't do well in here. And I think that's because I let that starting mix dry up too quick. Normally we would have used some kind of compost and peat moss with some vermiculite in it. But we had heard all the rage about this cocoa coir stuff. And since then, since we had the problem, we've learned a little bit more about how to use the stuff. So I'm going to try it again. Last year I said I'd never do it again, but I've had some success with the cocoa coir, so I think what it is, I just didn't understand the difference in the watering techniques. So, but this year, and if you'll excuse me, I'm going to read them. We're going to grow the red burgundy, which is a short day, 100 days to maturity. We're going to grow the Cabernet F1, which is an intermediate day, again has 100 days to maturity. White onions, we're going to grow Texas Grano, short day onions, 115 days to maturity. Sierra Blanca, which is an intermediate day, 109 days to maturity. And we're only going to do one style of yellow onions, which are the Candy F1. Again, intermediate day onions, 110 days to maturity. Now, the reason I say attempting to grow those varieties is because I did not purchase seed. Kind of doing an experiment, but it's mostly because I didn't order none. I went to buy some, and the supplier I went to hadn't got any in yet, and that's no big deal. We'll keep an eye out for some. If we have to, we'll order some, but honestly, here's the deal. These are 2 years old, and according to all the academic research I can find, onion seeds are viable for a year, but up to 2 years if they're stored right. It did say that the viability or the germination rate might be less than 50%. I don't know. Well, since this year I don't plan on growing a whole lot of onions, we're going to give it a shot. And if it just so happens to be that these don't do very well, I can always buy my seed starts when they get around here in just a few weeks. So that's what we're going to try to do. I don't recommend that you try that, but I'm also not going to discourage you, because we've had a lot of success trying things that people said don't work. So this year we're going to try to grow those varieties using the seeds we already have. And being that I'm not a cook or a chef, and I really don't particularly like eating a lot of onions. I like to have onion. I prefer to use onions in seasoning and in our cold and cough remedies. So I've got a little note here, just so you know, to consider the suitability or what type of onion you want to grow based on what you plan on doing with it. Red onions are best for raw applications like salad and pickling due to their mild flavor. Yellow onions are versatile for cooking, especially in soups and stews. White onions are great for the dishes like salsas and Mexican cuisine because their crisp texture, milder taste. Now I'll go ahead and tell you, I know a lot of people are probably curious what we do with onions for a cough and cold remedy. It's really simple. Just get your mason jar, don't matter what size it is. We normally use about a pint jar or a quart jar, most of the time a pint jar. And you just dice you up some onions. So you can chop them, it doesn't matter, diced or chopped. And you sprinkle you a thin layer on the bottom, just cover the bottom. And then drizzle honey. Now I don't mean pour the honey, I mean drizzle honey until it's covered. Add you another layer of onions, drizzle you some more honey, preferably local honey just to make that distinction. Put you another layer of onions, just keep repeating that process until you're about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way to the top. You can go a little more if you want to, but we stop at 3/4 of the way. Put the lid on it, put it in the refrigerator, and then in 24 hours, you'll have a syrup. What you want to do is you want to strain that syrup, get rid of those chopped onions. You don't need them anymore. And there you go. It works really good. Now, I will tell you, if you're in a pinch, in just a few hours, you can get you some syrup out of that thing. It'll be a lot more potent than what you're going to get the next day. And I'll be honest, it surprised me how pleasant it tasted. I'm not going to say that I drink the stuff for pleasure, but it sure wasn't as bad tasting as I thought it would be. So just in case you was curious, there you go. As we mentioned just a few moments ago, there's 3 ways to really get started with the onions. You can grow from seed like we're going to do today. You can buy seed starts, just like I said, from your local store, or you can start from the sets, those little bitty bulbs. Go ahead and reiterate, I don't recommend that you start from sets. Now, if you're not wanting to grow as big of bulbs as you could, there's nothing wrong with growing from sets, but it's been my experience that they didn't do as good as the starts or growing from seed. So we just recommend that people either start from seed or buy starter plants when they come available. You get a bundle of them, they're about this big around, $4 or $5. You probably get 30 or 40 plants, maybe 50 plants. So it's very affordable. And if you don't want to go through the trouble of all this, go right ahead, because we're going to keep these inside for 10 weeks, maybe 12 weeks, depending on the weather. So it's just a good time to bring that up. so you have that distinction before you decide which way you're going to grow your onions. So now let's talk about planting onions. Things you're going to need. Well, you know you're going to need trays or cups. I highly recommend you get these watering trays. It makes your life a whole lot easier. You're going to need a starting medium. What we're using this time, as previously mentioned, is a coco coir mixed with vermiculite. The exact proportions that we use is 2 parts coco coir and 1 part vermiculite. And that seems to be the sweet spot for everything that we've been doing so far. You're going to need some seeds. As we discussed, you're going to need a variety based on your longitude. Short day, intermediate day, long day, based on where you live. You're going to need you some labels if you're smart. Now, you can be brave and do whatever you want. You can have fun out in the garden, have a treasure hunt, Easter egg hunt, whatever. We like to recommend that you label things. I like to know what I'm getting when I go out there. You're going to need a watering can. You're going to need some water-soluble fertilizer. That's going to help here in the coming weeks. Optional, you get you some fans to keep the air circulating, help keep the disease pressure down. You get you some heat mats to help with your germination. Now, you won't need your heat mats if you're doing it indoors. Typically in the States, most of us keep our houses somewhere about 70, 72 degrees. That's perfect. If you're a little bit colder than that, you might want to keep the heat mats on there if you've got the ones that you can control the temperature. We don't use those. We just use the ones, you plug them in, they just go. They've done us a really good job, and they're really affordable. See, looking down the list here, I don't think there's one thing I did miss. You're going to need light. As you can see behind me, if you've watched these videos, you know that's what we use. We've got a few other setups just like that behind me there. You're going to need you some lights. Place to put them with some lights. That could be a windowsill. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, if you're interested in learning how we build them, we've got a couple videos about that. In fact, we got a video making a grow rack with grow lights using an old shoe rack that my wife was wanting to throw away. So those are things you're going to need. Please make sure you get everything ready before you get going. It's very disappointing, very frustrating. If you wait 14 to 20 days for these things to germinate and you don't have them where light's at, you're not going to like the results. They're going to get leggy. Now, with onions, if you catch them, you can push them down just a little deeper. Might not hurt you too bad, but I strongly recommend that you get sufficient light on all your seedlings to prevent them from getting leggy. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Of course, you're going to have your seed trays ready. You're going to have your starting medium in there, and you're going to have your seeds. Go ahead and have your labels ready. That would be the smart thing to do. I'll go ahead and get mine. I've got them pre-labeled. Going to start with the red burgundy, and I don't really know how many I'm going to have in this packet, so we're just going to plant what we can. And even though these seeds might not be as viable as they would have been last year, what I'd like to do is get 2 per cell, and that would be good. If I have more, we'll find some more trays. But all you got to do is, you can see I'm just laying them on the top, and I'll show you why I'm doing that here in just a minute. Actually, that got several in it. Let's go ahead and I bet I can. Try to get 1 or 2 of them out of there. But if I have enough, I'm going to try to fill this whole tray up. That's what we do. We go overboard sometimes. But onions, they don't really take up that much space in your garden, so it really don't matter. At least not the way I think. Now, if it was a big plant like a broccoli or a tomato plant or a pepper plant, that's something else. But as a general rule, the smaller your seeds, the less their shelf life is. They don't stay viable as long. It's amazing to me what all God put in these little seeds. They've got everything in them to give them life. They don't need any fertilizer till they're done started growing. They've got enough to get them started. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my pen and I'm going to stick these down. That's all I'm going to do. And I'll come back and cover it up, but that's all I'm going to do is I'm going to push them in the starting medium just about 1/4 inch. Then I'll come back and cover it up with the excess that I just worked up here. And in case I didn't mention it, I hope you know, but you might be a first-time grower, you need to make sure that this starting medium is pre-moistened. Now, I just made this coco coir, so it's plenty damp, but I still am going to water it in again later, and I might choose to do that from the bottom. I don't know, but I shoved that one in just a little too far. Hope it won't hurt it. But either way, just like that. Oh, missed one right there. Missed one right there. Missed one right there. Well, I missed several. All right. And then all I'm going to do is just, I'm going to take my finger, I'm going to just kind of pinch it up, cover it up, just cover the hole up. When we do our watering, that'll finish it. You just got to be real careful, because especially if your soil isn't pre-moistened, what you're going to do is you're going to float them seeds right to the top, and they need to have good coverage of that starting medium. Get our second tray over here, and these are going to be our Cabernets. But onion seeds are pretty small, so it's not uncommon that you're going to dump more than you're wanting to in these cells. And they're dark, so they're hard to see sometimes. So just do the best you can. It's not rocket science. Hopefully you were smarter than me and you bought you some seeds. But I don't know, I like doing this sort of thing. It's kind of fun. You never know, keeps the excitement up, keeps your interest anyway. And again, we just job them in with our pen, 1/4 of an inch deep, no big deal. And the reason I started doing it this way is because if you poke in a little divot there and you start trying to put seeds in there, like I said, they are very small. Sometimes it's difficult to know how many that you've put in each cell. And you're going to have to come back and thin these out anyway, but there's no sense in wasting seed. Now, if you're not going to grow many onions, you're going to get plenty extra seeds in the pack. But we've used these last year, and we're using them again, so that just tells you how many seeds are in a pack of these things. And there's no sense wasting them. Now, I don't know if these are going to grow, and I don't want to mislead you by telling you that 2-year-old seeds are definitely going to grow. I just know there's a good chance that they will, and I already had them, and it's time to get seeds started, and that's what I had, so that's what I'm going to use. I've said it one time, but it's worth mentioning again. I'm not recommending that you use 2-year-old seed. If you can get you some seed, by all means, get you some fresh seed. But these are what I had, and I'm willing to take the shot, and I've already got a backup plan. I'm going to get me some of those starts from our local grower should these fail. And don't forget to put your label in. These are our Cabernets. Well, I'm going to get these bigger trays filled up, and I'll show you how you can start your seeds in those. Well, we're back. We got our trays ready, and this time in these larger cells here, these larger cups, I am going to divvy out holes. I'm going to have 3 different varieties of onions in this one tray. Now, if you do this, the one thing you need to know is you need to leave these alone, and you're going to be tempted to take them out and move them around and all that stuff, and that's fine as long as you pay attention, or you label each individual cup. I'm going to label this section. It's going to have 30 onion plants. I'm going to label this section 30 onion plants. I'm going to label this section, again, 30 onion plants. We're going to start with our Texas Grano. Now, I got to looking in this pack. There's very few seeds, but thankfully I've got another pack. So let's get started here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's all you got to do. And I want you to know when you pack these cups in, you don't want to overly compress your starting medium, but you definitely want to make sure that it's packed in firm. Not compacted, but firm. So we'll divvy out all our holes, and we'll be right back. All right, we got our holes divvied out. Got our Texas Grano seeds in our hand. I'm going to put just 2 in each hole if I can do it. Like I said, when you poke these holes, it is really hard to see. So you're just going to have to feel the best you can with these little old seeds. It might take a little longer, but if you can just feel 2 in your hand before trying to deposit them in your hole, you'll be better off. But if you got plenty of seeds, you know, and where these are old seeds, I'm not expecting all of these to germinate. But I'm hoping by planting so many that at least half of them will. I'll go ahead and finish these up, and we'll be right back. And the final step is to water these seeds in. Do it real lightly. Now, I strongly recommend, I've got this mixing tub. This is our small one. I've got a larger one. Apparently I left it outside. It's snowing. I'm not going to go find it and dry it off and bring it in here for this video. But I highly recommend you get one of these mixing tubs for all this indoor work you're doing, man. It is great. You can mix your seed starting medium in here, your potting soil in here. You can water in these when you're doing your seed starting. It's really great. Just remember, do it real light. Just make sure that you get that stuff good and moist, and hopefully you pre-moistened your mix before you did all this, so it's not going to be hydrophobic. And we'll just set these on the rack behind us for now. As far as taking care of your seedling goes, keep that starting medium moist and make sure that you get them under light quick enough. We had some plants this past year. I can't remember which ones they were. We had several trays started, and I put them in a back room. Didn't forget about them, but they germinated a few days quicker than I was expecting, and they did not have any light on them. Boy, were them things leggy. Can't remember for the life of me what those were, but if you look in the previous videos, I'm sure I talked about it. But what we're going to do after the video is I'll go ahead and rewire the lights so that that rack right there is already lit up and don't even have to worry about it. These onions do not require light to germinate, unlike some seeds do. Very few, but some do. These do not. Onions do not require light to germinate. But that's really the only two things you got to watch for now. When your onions germinate and they start developing true leaves, that's when you're going to want to start fertilizing. And the best thing that you can do early on is get you a water-soluble fertilizer. Typically we use Jack's Professional, but you can use whatever you want to use. Just make sure that if you're using a synthetic fertilizer like Jack's, you dilute it pretty good. Normally it's recommended for a regular feeding, you would do 1 tablespoon per gallon. I strongly recommend that you use less than a teaspoon per gallon for your seed starts, and water it from the bottom, let it soak up, and be sure to feed your plants. Now, these plants are going to require watering pretty good. That's where I went wrong last year. I thought I was doing a good enough job, but I did not. So I strongly recommend that you water them probably every other day. With the medium we're doing now, that's what I would recommend. If you're using something with peat in it, you might get by with every 3rd day, but it all depends on the size of those cells, how much water they can soak up. And speaking of the cells, I think I failed to mention that typically, as long as you have 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches deep, that's the perfect size for growing your onion starts. Now, with those bigger cells that you've seen me do, the cups, we got 5 in those. They're plenty deep. They're about 3 inches deep, so they'll do pretty good. But as far as taking care of your seedlings goes, that's really all there is to it. Keep you some air moving about. If you can put you some fans on it, that would greatly help you. Don't forget to thin them out when they come up. You know, we put several seeds per hole. Make sure that you thin them out. Thin them out to your strongest plant. Only leave that one plant, and then you'll be good to go. When it comes to transplanting your plants, first thing you want to know is when to do it. Typically, it's 4 to 6 weeks before your last average frost date. Now, that is going to be determined by how cold it is in your area. You do not want the soil temperature to drop below 28 degrees. It'll kill your plants, especially those little bitty baby plants. So do make sure, and it's Fahrenheit, 28 degrees Fahrenheit. So do make sure that you get them out there at the right time. And if you think it's going to get cold, somewhere around 30 degrees, you do want to cover them up. Now, if they're more mature plants, like if you're familiar with the Hoss Tools channel, they're in South Georgia, much warmer climate. They don't even worry about nothing unless it gets to 20 degrees down there. But they're growing onions much, much sooner. In fact, their onions are probably not too far out from being harvested. But here where I live in northwestern North Carolina, right on the edge of the mountains, we're not so fortunate. We have to plant ours a little bit later, but it's still a harvest, and we're happy to do it. And when it comes to the spacing, really it's anywhere from 4 to 8 inches. It depends on your variety, how big your bulbs are going to get. Typically, you can get by with just every 6 inches. We try to do 6 or 8 inches, somewhere in there. We're not exact. We dig us out a furrow, and we just lay them in there, cover the furrow up, stand them up, firm it in, and that's the way we roll about it. but you want your rows anywhere between 12 and 18 inches apart. You can get by with closer than that if you're following like the square foot gardening method. You could probably do that if you wanted to, and there's nothing wrong with it. You just got to make sure that you got that airflow. If you live in a high humidity area during this growing season, they might develop some kind of issues. And speaking of issues, there's one little maggot you got to worry about. Onion maggots, maybe thrips, get hold of it, or maybe you get some rust, a disease that's on your onions. We typically don't have to worry about that around here, at least not me. Maybe it's because of where I live, or maybe as few onions as I grow, I don't know. But you do have to worry about that. As far as getting them out there and growing them, really, main thing is keeping them watered, keeping them fertilized. You want a high nitrogen fertilizer. Just be sure that nitrogen can be dangerous sometimes. You apply too much too fast, it'll burn them up. And I have done that. It was very disappointing, but it's part of the learning experience. So be sure that you water them regularly. Some people recommend watering your onions every other day. If you're fortunate enough to have a drip irrigation system, that'll do plenty good too. We hand water all of ours and haven't run into an issue. Just get the garden hose out there with the sprinkler head. It does plenty good. And I do apologize, but I think that maybe I forgot to mention that when you're transplanting them in the ground, you don't want to go no deeper than about an inch. You don't want to bury them too awful deep. They are bulbing. If you've ever seen an onion grow, the bulb is at the top of the soil. So don't plant them too awful deep. But when it comes to harvesting, that's where a lot of people have a lot of questions, and rightfully so. You can look at the days to maturity on your packet. That is from the time you transplant them, not from the time you grew them from seed. So most of mine are in the 100 to 110 day range. But typically what you'll see is you'll see the top start to fall over. Once the tops start to fall over, that's a good indicator that it's really soon. So you just want to keep an eye on them. And once you harvest them, if you've got good weather, lay them outside in the sun for a few days and let them start curing. Then take them somewhere in a cool, dry place, plenty of airflow, and leave them there for a couple weeks, and then they'll be good to store. Now, how long they store, that's up to the variety. Won't really get into that now because, to be truthful, I'd probably have to dig out a book to tell you. I know there's a lot of folks been doing it for a long time. They can just roll that stuff off, but I'm not going to mislead you folks. I'm just telling you what I know, maybe try to be a blessing to you, hopefully help you out. That way you can enjoy growing good food like these onions in your garden. And if you are one of those folks who are wanting to save some seed, don't forget you have to overwinter them so they can grow that second year. That's when that flowering stage begins, and once they do that, it's right easy. You'll see the flowers come up, then you'll see those little black things on the end. That's what you want to get. You want to get your seeds. But if you're watching this video, I'm pretty sure you're not interested in saving seeds right now. You're more interested in those big bulbing onions, and that's really what this video has been about. So if you live anywhere near where I live in North Carolina Zone 7B, now's the opportune time to get your seeds started. I sure hope you're getting ready to do that if you plan on growing onions. Or maybe you're going to wait till those starts arrive at the local retail. That's fine too, but I do strongly recommend that you do not grow from those sets. You can if you want to. If you're not wanting bigger bulbs, that's fine. They'll grow, but I strongly recommend that if you're not starting your onions from your own seed, hope you use those starter plants that you can pick up in the bundles from the store here soon. Like I said, it's not too much, $4 or $5. You get 30, 40, 50, can't remember how many's in there. Just you get a good amount for the money. It's not a bad deal. And be sure to check out last year's video if you're hungry for more information. I sure do thank you for watching, folks. It's been my pleasure. If you've enjoyed the video or you've learned something, I sure appreciate if you hit that like button, folks. Helps out the channel, lets us know that you appreciate it, lets YouTube know that you found value in the content. If you like gardening and garden related content, why don't you consider subscribing to the channel? We try to post pretty frequently, not as frequently as some people do, but we don't try to fill the channel with a bunch of fluff. We just try to garden and have fun doing it and bring you along. If you know some folks like you and me who enjoy gardening, I sure would appreciate it if you'd share it with other folks on social media. Thank you for sticking around to the end of the video. As always, this is Michael from the Backyard Vegetable Gardening Channel, hoping you having a really great day.